I know I'm really late to the party on this one, but better late than never, right? What is up, everybody, and welcome to my review of I Saw the TV Glow. Now, this is a film that I actually had the opportunity to check out back in March, April, when the Overlook Film Festival in New Orleans was going on, but it was playing kind of as like a repeat showing at the end of the festival, and me and Uncle Sean were exhausted at this point, and so we kind of made the executive decision that probably wouldn't be the fairest experience for the film for us to walk in when we're tired and kind of sick of watching movies. And now, after having seen the film, we absolutely made a good decision, because this is not the type of movie you want to watch when you're tired or when you're exhausted with festival-style films. Nonetheless, this is a movie that, as it is premiered, as more people have seen it, I've seen a lot of chatter about it. I've seen people like basically on both extremes, not a whole lot in the middle. People loving it, saying it's the best horror film of the year, one of the best things they've seen in a long time, and people saying, nope, absolutely not for me. And while I'm self-aware of my movie taste and what typically works for me, and many of you are as well who have been watching me for a very long time, both of us probably could have given a pretty accurate assumption this movie was not going to be my thing, but I still like to give movies a chance, because that's not always a rule. Sometimes you walk into something that you think, I don't typically like movies like this, and it does something different that really works for you. Just like sometimes movies that should be safe bets that you walk into and say, this is definitely my thing, you walk out disappointed because it just turned out it wasn't. Now, for this review, especially since this movie's been out for a little while, I do need to get into the metaphors and the allegories and what overall this movie is trying to convey with its story. And some of you may consider that spoilerific, because I'm going to have to get into details of specific scenes. So a large chunk of this review will be spoiler-free, where I talk about some of the technical aspects and the acting and things like that, to give you an idea if this movie is for you or possibly not. But when I start talking about the specific metaphors of this film, what the surface level story is and how that relates to the underbelly story, the commentary that they're trying to make, you may want to leave at that point and go check this thing out if it is in fact something that you're interested in. And the basic premise of this film is that you have these two characters that are basically social outcasts. They don't really fit in anywhere, and they bond and form this friendship over this very odd TV show that they like, that is kind of like this cult program that not too many people talk about or acknowledge, called The Pink Opaque. And essentially throughout the film, the main character's relationship with this TV show and what this TV show represents for his detachment from his quote-unquote reality is really an allegory and a metaphor for something else entirely that I'm going to get into. So it's very much a movie that is a story told through symbolism. So starting off with the positives, I think that the technical side of this film, the direction, the shot choice, the lighting, just the visual style overall of the movie was really interesting. It was very uncomfortably intoxicating, if that is something that makes sense. Like, you know the whole time something's off here. Even the most mundane scenes in the film have this oddness to them. And so you always feel like, I don't know if I like the direction I'm heading in. I feel like bad things are about to happen. But at the same time, you can't exactly look away, because the neon flavor that it gives, the way that the camera specifically moves in certain spots, even the way that they have this little narration breaks here and there with Justice Smith's character, where he's mid-scene in character and then he kind of pauses, breaks the fourth wall, and continues to narrate to the audience. There was something really interesting and stylistic about it that really drew me in. Even if some of the things narratively or character-wise weren't drawing me in, the way that the movie was crafted was very interesting. But on the performance side, I do think that Justice Smith does an incredible job in this film. Now, we've seen a number of things from him over the last couple of years. I'm pretty sure he was in one of the Jurassic World films. Most recently, he was in the Dungeons & Dragons movie. That was a really nice surprise. And what stood out to me so much about his performance here is that it is so unlike anything else that I've seen him do. His character and the performance to bring that character to life is very odd, very strange, and yet requires a lot of emotion to convey how little emotion this character has. There's so much of this film where this guy feels so detached from reality, from other humans, from what separates his world from this TV show that he is so infatuated with. And then as the film goes on, it's kind of told in timeline chunks throughout his life. As the film goes on and the character matures and gets older, the emotional side of him takes over as his emotions continue to dissipate. And it's something that I have a hard time wrapping my mind around how you prepare for that as an actor. How you convey somebody that is basically dead inside while showing emotion to evoke that. And then you have Bridget Lundy Payne, who is kind of a co-lead, much smaller character than Justice Smith's character is in place of the story, but she was good as well. Didn't stand out near as much to me simply because I always see her do these types of characters in the films and the shows that I have seen from her, whether it's Atypical, Bill and Ted, this. She's always playing somebody on the spectrum of social outcast, somebody who's awkward and doesn't quite fit in or know their place. So she's very good at doing that. There's a reason why she keeps getting cast for these types of roles, but good, not as standout as Justice Smith. Another thing that I found very impressive about this, that was honestly the most intoxicatingly strange thing about this film, is that you have this in-universe TV show that is the catalyst for this friendship and for most of the story that we are going to be told, that's called The Pink Opaque. And the way that they create and craft this TV show is this very interesting mix of nostalgic 90s television vibes while having this very subtly ominous and uncomfortable look and visual to it. Like, this show very much harkens back to things like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark and these TV programs that were the shit in my youth. And yet, something about the characters and the language and especially the lo-fi visual of it and the makeup effects that are on the villains in this show, there's something that is so nondescript and uncomfortable about it that it almost battles the nostalgia in a way. Like, it makes you look back at those shows in your youth and you're like, would I think the way that I feel about this show about Are You Afraid of the Dark and Goosebumps if I watched them for the first time as an adult? Like, is nostalgia blinding me from how weird and strange those shows were? It's very interesting, the emotions that it evoked in me, where I'm like, I remember loving shows like this, and yet the way it's presented to me now really feels like something that I would never watch. Like, there's something there that would push me away going, I feel like I shouldn't be watching this. And the final thing that I'll say as a positive for this film is that I do find it to be very bold and creative with the symbolism and with the metaphors and allegories that it's using to tell its story. Anytime that you have a storyteller and a filmmaker that is trying to give you the experience of what it's like to walk in somebody else's shoes that you will never completely understand and never completely be able to sympathize with, through allegory and through symbolism, and kind of sneaking that in to a movie that otherwise on its surface level looks like it's about something else entirely. When that succeeds, I find that to be very impressive. And this is probably the part where you want to go ahead and click off if you're trying to remain completely spoiler-free and walk into this blind. If it's a movie you want to check out, please come back, watch the rest of it, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But specifically what this movie is trying to convey, you have the surface level story of this social outcast that bonds with this other social outcast over this very cult TV show that somehow feels more real to them than the reality that they are living in, and how that manifests and really changes them in different ways throughout the rest of their lifetime. It's all a commentary and it's all an allegory for somebody that is suffering from gender dysphoria. From somebody that feels like they are in the wrong body. From somebody where their reality quite literally feels like this suffocating narrative that doesn't fit the way that they feel about themselves. And the way that they used specific things in here, like only the couple of scenes that we get from Fred Durst as this kid's stepfather, just, you know, nonchalantly telling him that this TV show is for girls, or him very much envisioning himself as kind of living vicariously through one of his favorite TV characters, and a character that is the opposite gender of him. So there's quite literally sequences where he's dreaming with Bridget Lundy, and she is the way that she always looks, and he's wearing a dress. And even the way that the film decides to wrap up, which is him now in his 40s, maybe even 50s at this point, and living this life where he feels not only isolated and screaming out and gasping for breath because he's so suffocated with this this lie that he's telling himself and this lie that he's living for the benefit of everybody else. And the 1-2 punch, kind of gut punch that ends on is that the people that he's trying to live this lie to appease don't pay any attention to him whatsoever. And as somebody that has never had gender dysphoria, and I have never had an experience that would even correlate with any of that, I found that to be very interesting as a way to try to put you into the shoes of somebody that has lived that. But with that being said, moving on to the negatives, there was really two major issues for me with my experience that inevitably led this to be a film that I didn't entirely enjoy. And they kind of commingle together into one big glaring negative. First of all is just the pacing of the film. This is a very slow-paced film. There's plenty of times where the shots are intentionally left to linger for almost an uncomfortable length of time, which is certainly meant to elicit discomfort, but can also really hurt the pace of things moving along. Even just dialogue scenes, the dialogue is given in a slow manner. There's a few spots where a character goes on a monologue that just really goes on for an extended amount of time. And at least in the surface level story that we are watching, these two characters bonding over this TV show and how it affects them the rest of their life, there's not really a ton that stands out narratively. There's no memorable shocks or scares. There's nothing that, feels like some kind of a set piece that we're building towards. It's just these characters talking and watching TV and being socially awkward at multiple points in their life. So it's a movie that's not going for a whole lot of flash and really takes its time while doing that, which would be fine if it felt like we were building to something narratively, if there was a reveal, if there was a victory, if there was some kind of a conflict resolution that we are building towards that keeps you hooked while going through this slow pace. That's how a movie that's slow paced can really still maintain your interest and maintain your entertainment. But the big issue with this film, despite the fact that I think the symbolism they're going for is very creative and interesting, and certainly can see it be very impactful for a lot of people, it's a movie that shows its head within the first 20 minutes. Like, there's lines of dialogue and there's direct visuals that really tipped me off, at least, to what they were going to be exploring very early on in the film. And then for the next hour, I'm watching this movie that's acting as if I don't completely understand what they're going to be going for, and it's eventually going to be revealed. And I was already completely informed of what the story was. So you just go through the next hour going, yeah, I get it. And then you build to a second act that just kind of reiterates what the first act said. And then eventually a third act that just kind of reiterates what the first and second act said. And it's like, yeah, I get it. You kind of said that 30 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago, an hour ago. I mean, you have a dialogue exchange between these two characters where Bridget says to Justice, I'm a lesbian, right? I like girls. Like, nothing's going to happen here. And he's like, yeah, totally good. I get all that. And then she asks him about his sexuality in a kind of indirect way. And he has this quote that I'm going to have to paraphrase where he essentially he's like trying to figure out words. He's lost for words. And he's like, that thing, when I think about that, it feels like somebody took a shovel and scooped it out of me. Added in with his stepfather telling him that TV show you love is for girls, and later on him having this fever dream that him and his best friend are the characters in the show, and she looks the way she always looks, and he's wearing a dress, as I've already described, pretty on the nose in my mind. Maybe I'm alone, maybe some of you, and please tell me down in the comments, did not completely figure out what was going on in this film and what they were talking about until the third act, and it was actually a really rewarding experience for you. Totally fair. For me, it just felt very deliberate. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm on board for what you're talking about. This is interesting. This is a very off-kilter and strange way to kind of subvert what we're talking about, and I'm on board for that. What else you got in store for me? Oh, just that. Again. Anything else? You have the second act. Bridget comes back and she looks a little more masculine with her haircut and everything, which I'm sure was deliberate, where she tries to tell him, I've been gone for the last decade and I've actually been living in the TV show and it's so much better than our reality. Come with me, which is very much her saying, I have accepted my true identity and I have embraced that and I've become the person that I want to be. you need to do the same thing because I know that you are the same way that I am and you're living a lie, like, join us. Third act, he has since completely abandoned her and completely rejected her invite, her influence, and has continued to live the life that he has always lived, and he looks miserable. And the more that timeline goes on, the worse that his asthma gets, which is kind of a representation for him being suffocated by this life that he has chosen to live. And he has this freak out, opens up his chest in the bathroom and sees the TV glow and gets all happy, like him peering into the life that he could have chosen and the life that he wants to live, and then he stitches it back up and just keeps moving on with the fake reality, if you will. Again, good metaphors, good allegories, very creative, interesting stuff, but very redundant for such a slow-paced film when you're so on the nose about what you're going to be discussing within the first 30 minutes. And that's ultimately what led me to not completely enjoy this film, while certainly respecting what it's trying to do and clearly effectively does for a number of other people that have watched it. If you're going to have a movie that's going to try to have some very creative storytelling like that, for me, you got to give me something to keep me interested. You got me interested. I get what you're talking about. Now there's an hour left. What are we going to do with it? So all in all, guys, this is a movie that I wish I could have loved, because this type of movie is something that's very interesting and very necessary to kind of have in the mix of our slasher films and our comic book films and everything. A movie that really is genuinely trying to say something. That's always interesting. I just wish they did a better job at maneuvering their metaphors a bit better to keep me interested. But for a lot of you guys that like symbolism in your storytelling, you like more artsy films, you like things to be very different and unique and off-kilter, this is absolutely your type of film. Check it out. If everything I've described feels like a movie that you typically don't really enjoy a whole lot, maybe give it a shot. It is on sale right now on Amazon Prime, which is why I checked it out. It was like $6 to rent, so give it a shot, but might not be for you. Unfortunately, it wasn't for me. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all my 2024 new release reviews. I'm also going to put my review of Cuckoo, which was the new release horror film that I enjoyed significantly better than this one. Check that out if you want. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.